There is no time now to be selfish. It's time to think of the broader community and your families. If you are actually spreading the virus, you could be responsible for people's deaths.
News, current events, politics, and everything in between. This is your number one source for finding out the truth. Never censored, never apologetic, and always patriotic. You're tuned in to the Patriot Perspective with the people's proud patriot, Alan Lee. What is up? It is your proud patriot, Alan Lee. I have a very special guest live in Australia right now. It is about 10 a.m. Friday morning there. Her name is Monica Smit. She has been leading the fight for Australian people's freedoms. Their freedoms, if you haven't heard, are being quickly stripped away from them, all under the excuses of the pandemic. So before we bring her on the show, go ahead and smash the like button. It helps us out greatly here at the studio. Also, go ahead and click subscribe. Also, hit the bell. That way you won't miss any of the upcoming shows. You'll get notified through YouTube for that. So without further ado, I want to bring Monica Smit onto the show. Hey, how is it going?
Sorry about the green, everyone.
So,
that was meant to be this way.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sorry about that. We weren't able to add the image there for, but the green looks great anyway. So yeah, we were struggling with time zones and everything else, trying to get you on the show. So I'm glad that we were able to get our schedules to match up and to get you on here. If everyone has just joined us, it is Monica Smit. You are in Australia, and you have been directly dealing with these mandated lockdowns and things that are going on there. Give us a little bit of insight for maybe anybody who hasn't kept up with what's going on there, because I know the media hasn't really been covering it properly. So give us a little bit of insight to what you're dealing with there.
Sure. Well, I'm in Victoria, which has the unfortunate record of the most lockdowns, the longest lockdown in the world. So Victoria is definitely the worst in Australia. But the difficult thing about what Australia has gone through is every state seems to be acting on its own and kind of like it's its own country. So we haven't been able to cross some borders. Within hours, they can decide to just close the borders, and families get divided, businesses get impacted. I think 3 out of the 5 states you can't get into the state without being double jabbed. In Victoria, especially, the segregation between the jabbed and unjabbed is obviously huge. So basically, if you're not willing to show your papers, you can't do anything except for grocery shopping and looking at real estate to buy houses and etc. Even 12-year-old children cannot go-karting or bowling without being double jabbed. They're not being able to go to any of their school functions or graduations or anything like that. And then on top of that, Daniel Andrews, who's the Premier of Victoria, has just gotten through a very controversial pandemic legislation. It's called permanent pandemic legislation. So our Premier can actually declare a pandemic on his own without any health advice or reason or justification at all. The oversight committee is not even in place until February. So basically, he is the dictator. He's a dictator of Victoria. And fines for businesses for what they call aggregated public health offences, which is like what the government consider a business going out of their way to, spread something.
Wow.
The fine is $450,000. $450,000.
And
also, yeah.
Now that fine, is that for the businesses or is that for individuals across the board?
That is for the businesses. The smallest fine for an individual is $20,000, and in America that would be about $12,000. And I could get fined 20,000 Australian dollars for not checking in.
And now, what exactly is checking in for anybody who's watching? To clarify what checking in means.
Sorry, yeah, it's funny how it's become such common language for us, but it's so strange. It's the QR codes on all the doors of all the businesses. So you're supposed to check in with your phone so that the government knows where you are all the time. But really, they sell it as though if someone in that shop has COVID, then they can let you know and force you to stay home for 14 days. But really, what it is obviously the government knowing where you are. So if I don't check in and I get caught not checking in, I can get a $20,000 fine. Also, if I'm not wearing a mask and I don't have a valid reason according to the government, that's a $20,000 fine as well. So yeah, it's pretty insane.
I mean, wow, there's so many questions.
I know.
So let's jump back to the checking in thing, because I know that just recently here in the States, they've been uh, just now starting to roll out the vaccination apps where Google Pay and Android
Mm,
Pay are able to upload those and track those. Um, I mean, obviously the technology's there, but we haven't been notified here of anything like that where you would scan something at a doorway. Um, how fast
mhm.
did they roll that out there? Because they're just now starting to digitize people's vaccination records here. I know the people who got vaccinated, in the beginning, they told them, keep your card, take a picture of it because we're not even logging this. So how fast were they able to roll out this whole digital system?
Wow, this has actually been in place for, I would say, almost 10 months here.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, this has been going on for a very long time, the QR codes. People like that the government has found a way to basically turn employees of companies into police. So a company, imagine paying a whole extra wage to an employee to stand at a door and check people's QR code check-ins and check their vaccination status and check that they're wearing a mask. So you've got these poor 16, 17-year-old kids in the front of grocery stores trying to be a policeman. It's the strangest thing. And then you watch people walking, like they go around a shopping center and people are so well programmed now that they check in like everywhere they go. So if they go to a kiosk over here, they'll check in and then they'll go into another shop and they'll check in there and you just see these people just walking up and just checking in and checking in. Everyone's scared of the government.
And I mean, wow, it's just I knew it was bad, but I didn't know all the little details that were going on with it. So, um, and like you said, people get conditioned for that. I mean, people get conditioned with the mask as well. I personally have pushed through. The only time I wore a mask was when it was like, I had to be in a hospital for a reason, and you just really can't go there otherwise. Um, but I did talk to people who said that, they didn't like wearing masks, but they wore them, and then they felt weird when they didn't have them on, and they were being conditioned to have them on all the time. Um, so they're checking in everywhere they go. Um,
Mhm.
and you said it's for fear of the government. Is that what you're seeing? Is that the majority of the people are doing it out of fear, or do you have a large amount of people who are like, oh, this all makes sense, let's keep doing it?
It's hard to know because obviously I'm surrounded by people who are not afraid of the virus and
Right.
are not afraid of the government in a certain way and think it's all, obviously over exaggerated. So it's hard for me to really know. But what I can say is as soon as the government says, okay, you don't have to wear masks outside anymore, that's how I don't even need to watch the media to know what the new rules are with masks. All I need to do is walk out of my door and look around and I'm like, oh, the government must have changed the outdoor mask rules. That's how compliant people are, and
Wow.
that's how I know that it's the government that scares people. It's not the virus at all.
Right.
The only about 30% to 35% of people got the jab voluntarily based on soft coercion. It was only when they started to threaten people's livelihoods and jobs that the rest of the 40, 50, 60% of people got the jab. So they're afraid of losing their livelihood and they're afraid of fines and they're afraid of being put in prison like I was or getting fined and there's so much footage of police bashing people like
Hmm.
full on bashing elderly women, giving people fines for not wearing a mask in the park even though they've got a coffee in their hand. Police check to make sure that there's coffee in the cup, to make sure that the person isn't lying about having coffee in the cup so they're not wearing a mask. So people are just scared of authority. People are scared of going to the hospitals. My mum, I think she had something that seemed quite similar to COVID, and she was having difficulty breathing. And she said to me, "Whatever happens, I don't care. I would rather die here than go to the hospital because the hospitals are killing fields."
Mm-hmm.
My mum would rather die in her bed than go to hospital, because in the hospitals here in Australia, they are withholding life-saving treatment from us. Okay. We don't have ivermectin. We don't have hydroxychloroquine. They won't even give us intravenous vitamin C if we beg for it and have lawyers write letters begging to give someone vitamin C. They won't give it to them. Then you have the onslaught of adverse reactions coming into the hospitals and no one saying anything. I just met a couple of people and they walked into the hospital and they knew straight away. They said, what was the date of your jab? They know. So hospitals have become killing fields, and my mum would rather die in her bed. And that is just so Australians have lost complete faith in the all authority, which is really dangerous, because when we are going through something, we need police, we need the hospital. We're not going to want to go. So people are actually dying out of fear of the government as well. So
Yeah, and that's one of the things that are similar here is they won't if they, if you're found to have a positive COVID test, they won't give you anything that's not on that protocol. It doesn't matter if it's ivermectin or vitamin C, um, something as simple as Pepto-Bismol. They will not give you anything for any of your symptoms unless it's on their list for their protocol. I know a couple doctors who, they'll give you ivermectin, but they try to persuade you off of it. And then when it all comes down to it, if you continue to demand it, you have to sign a waiver that states that you demanded it, because otherwise the FBI is coming after the doctor's licenses.
yep.
So, now you said you did time for this. You were in prison for, I believe it was 22 days.
Yep.
Let's go back a little bit. So, Australia was, it was a free country. The laws there and here weren't all exactly the same. But I mean, the way I look at it is our Constitution isn't giving us rights. They're just letting us know that they're not going to infringe upon the rights that God gave us. And if God gave us rights, God gave you guys and everywhere else in the world the exact same rights. So I could care less what constitution we have. Some people say, oh, well, they don't have the same constitution we have. Well, it doesn't matter, because if you believe in our constitution, it was given by God, then they don't have to have it written down. They still should have the same rights. So, but let's rewind to 2018, 2019. What was life like then? And where can you explain the catalyst where they took that big leap happened?
Well, Australia, I think we've always been under an illusion of freedom, and we've never really had to fight for anything in my generation anyway. But in reality, I think we've been slowly having our freedoms taken away from us, obviously, just like everyone has all over the world, But I think COVID has just highlighted that we actually aren't free at all. We're just given a kind of a long leash, and now
Right.
the leash is getting shorter and shorter. That's pretty much what's happening. But of course, COVID was the catalyst. I don't know if the government had this plan all along to totally take away our human rights. Probably, because it obviously seems to be a global sort of agenda. But they could have just been scared of COVID at the start, made some mistakes, and then don't want to admit that they were wrong. So they're just continuing on with the charade. I don't know, but Victoria has had the longest, worst, most draconian lockdown. So this was the catalyst for them, putting us into enslavement, basically, and just being constantly fearful. And it's like you can't even plan a birthday party, because our government can literally say on on mainstream media, that's it, everything's closing in 2 hours. 2 hours. And people have to try and get across borders to go home before the lockdown. Like, restaurants buy thousands of dollars worth of equipment, food, and then it all goes to waste. So that constant state of anxiety for Victorians especially has actually put everyone into a constant mentally disabling position. We're actually damaged, and I don't say that in a feel sorry for us way. It's
Right.
not our fault. It's a genius slow manipulation, boil the frog sort of scenario. It's not our fault. it's designed to break us, and we won't break, but we are definitely damaged. A lot of people are having they can't get out of the house. They've got social anxiety. So even if it is open up, they don't want to get out. Sorry, I went off topic a little bit, but the catalyst was definitely COVID. And then I do believe that and the rest of the world believes this too, many places, that Australia seems to be the testing ground or the tip of the spear. How lucky are we? And the reason we know that is because, we were the first to really bring in the mandates, as bad as they are. We had the longest lockdowns. And also, I think the reason Australia is such a great place for that is that we're so far away. We were on an island, we're isolated, we've got a smaller population, and that population is spread apart. So, and we have no guns. So
Right.
it's a lot easier for us to be the testing ground. We also, our attitude is very, very like, she'll be right. You've probably heard that saying before.
Mhm.
That's why everyone loves Australians. We're easygoing and we're really fun, and we don't take much to heart. And I think that's why we're the perfect testing ground. We don't fight back. We're all about peace and love and harmony. But like, that hasn't really worked so far for us. But so, and I'm not advocating for the opposite. I'm just saying
Right.
that's why we're the great testing ground, and that's why we're in this position.
When they do these last minute lockdowns, because I'm constantly, as you're talking, thinking about like the similarities. Now here, when they announce a new lockdown, they kind of show their hand more of how things aren't as emergency sense as they try to say, because they'll say new lockdown coming in 3 days. And we'll need to do all these different things. And sometimes it's around a holiday, so they give you the kind of the holiday off. But they talk about how important it is, and kids must wear masks at school starting on Monday, but it's Thursday. And so they kind of show their the idiot thinking to it. And it would make more sense to do it the way that they're doing it in Australia, where they come up with new data, and all of a sudden you have to stop now. But do they ever give a reason for these things? Do they ever say, oh, we need to lock it down in 2 hours based on X, Y, and Z? Or do they kind of just now throw it out there and don't really care to give any type of illusion or smoke and mirrors?
My gosh, the opposition, if you can even call it that, Parliament here, have been trying to get proof of why they're locking down schools, because obviously there's hardly any proof of children transmission. They closed playgrounds. They closed outdoor playgrounds during one of the lockdowns. They asked for proof about why they did that. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And the rationality makes no sense, because at one point when we went through the 4-month lockdown, it was to try and get to COVID zero, okay, which is obviously scientifically impossible. But
Right.
anyway, they were trying to get down to zero, and they said once we got under 5 cases, 5 positive PCA cases, then we can open up. So now we're opening up, but we've got thousands of cases. So it's really makes no sense. It's not really following logic. And that's part of the mental anguish that we're going through, because if you try to make sense of it, you literally drive yourself crazy, because none of it makes sense. Why can listen to this, a brothel can be open, but you can't go visit your mum in the aged care home. So, we should get married in a brothel or something, because that was open, and, so it just doesn't make any sense.
Are people, because here, I mean, there's always been conspiracies of, uh new concentration camps and things like that. And obviously they're using those in Australia. What are they, when they started to use those, what did they put forth to the people there? And how was that taken? Obviously people are afraid of the government, so not everybody was outspoken. And obviously, even with the protests and things, some people are outspoken. But what was the overall consensus? Were people completely thrown off by it and taken, aback? Or did they kind of say, okay, this makes sense, or we saw this coming? Was it a huge shock and surprise to them?
Well, it depends what kind of people you're talking about, obviously. The people that I don't know, which are people that, trust the government, probably think it's great because, you know, it's going to allow more international travel, you know, because they can come and they can quarantine there for 14 days. But yet again, you can't come if you're not double jabbed anyway. So why would you need to quarantine if the double jab worked? So that's where, but my people, so to speak, we saw this coming. We saw this coming. It wasn't actually a shock. And it's not a conspiracy theory to imagine that the apparent 10% who are unjabbed, that's where they're going to be. It's just not at all a conspiracy anymore, because it's already happening in the Northern Territories. People are, as you would have seen, they're being taken against their will to Howard Springs quarantine facility to voluntarily isolate like it's a joke. And then they try to escape and they get fined $5,000. Like, that's not very voluntary, is it? And the one that's being built in Victoria, it's going to be staffed by prison officers. So what does that tell you? And if we've got 92% double vaccination, then why would anyone need to quarantine? And if international people can only come if they're double vaccinated and they can isolate at home because, you know, they're not disease spreaders apparently, then why would they need this massive billions of dollars of quarantine? Now, there's the other part of it as well, is that the media and the narrative is really painting the protesters and the what they call anti-vaxxers. I know the same thing would be happening there. They're really dividing everyone, and the segregation does it even more. So I got to be honest with you. I think there'll be a large percentage of the population that will watch people like me being dragged to these quarantine camps, and they'll think it's a good idea. They'll think it's great. They'll actually praise the government for it. And that's scary. And then you've got the police who are already willing to pepper spray 70-year-olds while they're on the ground already and shoot people in the back with massive rubber bullets as they're trying to leave a protest. They're already willing to do that. So to ask them to come to my house and force relocate me, it's totally fine. That's the plan.
And you did an interview with Haley Hodgson.
Yeah.
So I have a short clip here I want to play from that, because that pretty much happened to her. So let's check this out.
Yeah, so I was in close contact with someone who provided a weak positive to COVID. I had investigators knock on my door and ask, did you know this person? Have you been with them? I said yes. I told them my whereabouts, and then they asked if I had a test done. I replied and said yes, that I had, when I hadn't. And then they left. They then rang who does the test and said, we can't find your name or anything that you've had a test done. And then I said, look, I've lied to you. I actually haven't had a test done. I was scared. I've been in quarantine before. You know, I just didn't want to go back there. I'm sorry that I lied. They said, right, no worries. And they hung up the phone and said, someone will be there to test you in the next 20 minutes, so don't leave your home. Within 20 minutes, I had 2 police block my driveway, and I walked on out and I said, hi, what's going on? And they said, you're coming with us. You're going to Howard Springs to quarantine. And I said, well, this is the first I've heard. You know, I was just told that people were coming to test me. And then it was literally, I was taken there against my will. It was like, you either come with us and you're dished out with a $5,000 fine. Otherwise, we'll call you a COVID cab. So I went with the COVID cab because obviously I didn't want the fine or anything. And a pub courtesy bus rocked up to take me to Howard Springs.
I've just come and she's being taken away. But look at the COVID van.
Bistro copes and functions.
How professional.
And then the police followed in their car, pursuing me to Howard Springs. And those policemen said, you know, you'd only be there for 48 hours till your test results come back negative. It'll only be 48 hours. We'll hold you there. And that calmed me down because obviously I've been in here before, which was just horrible. And then when I got there, Howard Springs pretty much said, no, you're here for the 14 days no matter what.
So that's something that's happening quite often, where they're getting you kind of to agree to go under one pretense and then just not letting you go anywhere. And as if they are, and these facilities, you're saying that they're getting police officers to work at, but the facility itself isn't, is it deemed a governmental established place, or is it technically not, but you're not allowed to leave without governmental repercussions?
No, technically they'll say it's voluntary isolation, but
Hmm.
but then they'll fine you $5,000 if you don't go, or they'll harass you, and they'll turn up with police like they did with Haley. It's just like the jab is voluntary. It's voluntary for you to not get it and lose your job. So everything is a mind game. And yeah, like I said, people tried to escape Howard Springs. And why would you escape something that wasn't, why would you even use that word if it wasn't something that you were being forced to do?
Yeah, I believe there were 2 teens that escaped more recently, and the footage of that looked like it was a worldwide manhunt for some serial killer. Um,
Oh,
which,
yeah. Yeah.
now, what I didn't follow up if they were actually caught and anything that happened to them, if they were caught.
They
But
were caught.
it's
They were
it's it's
caught.
ins
Yeah.
So do you know, so what happens when someone escapes and they're caught? Are they fined and sent back, or is there more that happens to them then?
They're fined and sent back, generally speaking. However, there was one man who, he was well known in the movement, and he crossed borders, and just like, and he publicized it all over the place, and he was organizing events during lockdowns, which obviously, I think that's his God-given right, but according to the government, that's pretty bad behavior. He went to prison for like 4 months, just for going on a road
Wow.
trip. Yeah. So, um, like they've managed to criminalize this public health emergency, also they call it, and Australians are just like fine to see people go through that. So, and I just interviewed another lady yesterday, who has 3 children in that facility, Howard Springs facility, 3 young children, and they can't leave the balcony. They can't even blow bubbles because they might be blowing COVID around the facility. So it's they've been in there for 18 days in a crappy
Wow.
facility like that with 3 kids. So, like one of the kids split her head open trying to play, and it took 4 hours for them to come and see her. Her head was split open, for goodness sake. So it's a mess. It's a mess in there.
And reading a comment here, says Southern Australian Senator Alex Antic said that the Australian people trust the government more than Americans, and that's one of the reasons why it got to the point it is there. Is that something that you've experienced as true there?
Absolutely. I think it's been a slow burn, but we've had a really good life here. We've got job opportunities, we've got good government subsidies, we've got everything we need here, and we've had a really great life, and that's why we're so complacent. So now America is a little bit different. I feel like you guys have had, you've had the civil wars, you've had to fight for your country. Oh, well, so we didn't have
Yeah.
to fight for Australia. We just got taken here. Yeah. And so it's just so different. It's just so different, the people here. We're not patriotic. We've been manipulated to not be patriotic through our school systems. Having an Australian flag is basically racist. Yeah, we just aren't patriotic, and we don't care. We gave away our guns. I think the government offered us $500 per gun to give it into the government about maybe 10 years ago or something like that, after an incident. And we all just gave our guns up because we thought, well, nothing bad's going to happen in Australia. Australia is like the most loving and free and democratic country in the world, and here we are.
Yeah. And it's crazy because the American flag, the left is trying to, it's one of those things that if you see someone flying an American flag, 9 times out of 10, they're Republican, and they love the country and they're a patriot. And usually you don't see the American flag being flown by anybody protesting on the left. It's become a symbol of, they're turning it into a symbol of hatred and racism,
Yeah.
and trying to do the same thing because, if they can get you to believe that the country is something that it's not, then
Mhm.
they can re re rewrite re
Rewrite
rewrite.
history.
Yes, I couldn't get the words out. Um, is the senator still in detention, or is he out now?
Well, he wasn't in detention, I don't think. I think he was in quarantine.
Quarantine.
So yeah, so he had to go home. So that's in between states. It's very tricky getting home. So you can leave a state, but you just never know if you can get home. Literally, you just don't know.
So, and when they boot you out of the place, so like you're there voluntarily, and then they finally say 14 days, you can go now. Is it just like they're pretending everything's normal and everything's okay? Do they retest you again? Do they make you check in with them when you get home? Like how do they release their grip on you once they've had you in quarantine?
I think there's about 3 to 5 tests depending on the situation. Like the woman with the children, everyone has to be negative before they can leave. And so 3 out of the 4 people in there with her 3 children and herself, are all negative, but there's one son that keeps testing positive, so they all have to stay there. So I don't know what happens after you leave, to be honest, but I can say that the organization who's running it, like I know one family who's all tested positive for COVID. There's 5 of them, right? And DHHS, which is the company that is, Department of Health and Human Services,
Mhm.
they're calling about every individual person every day. Like they haven't figured out that they're one family and that they can just talk to the mum, you know? So
Right.
they're like chasing their tail, just calling people and just like checking in on them. And if they don't answer the phone, they'll send police to the house. And these are just people who have tested positive at a PCR test sort of station. They get calls from DHHS like every single day for the next 14 days. And yeah, like I said, if they don't answer the phone, they'll come and arrest you, or they'll drag you off to a quarantine facility, or if you lie like Haley did, they'll take you away as well. So everyone, yeah.
Well, how's the response from the police force? And here we have a lot of police who are taking a stand, and they're saying that they won't do things like that if it came to it. And then when they tried to put in the mandates where if you didn't get the jab, you couldn't work for the force, you couldn't be in the military. A lot of them resigned. A lot of them got kicked out because they refused to do so. What is it like there? Obviously, you have the fear aspect. But does it seem like, or were there any police officers who walked off the job when they were told that they would have to go and do these things?
Hardly any, unfortunately. Maybe 300 out of about 20,000 police were actively trying to hold the line, and they were trying to put a case together and stuff like that. It didn't work out for them, and a lot of them got the jab. So there's a very big difference between Australian police and American police, is that being a policeman in America is actually super dangerous because of all the guns you have and because of the activities that go on there. It is very different. In Australia, no offense to the Australian police force, but they're pansies. All right. Honestly, the training and the exercise, like the quota that you have to meet for your fitness and stuff, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Mm.
And they have a woman quota, they have a female quota that they have to reach as well. So you've got these little 5 foot nothing girls on the front line with with pepper spray and stuff like that. And they're the first to use their pepper spray because they're scared, because they're
Yeah.
tiny and they shouldn't be in the front line of anything. And so I think the police here do not have the conviction that the American police have, only because the job just doesn't call for it. That
Right.
they're never in danger here, literally hardly ever.
And the police have guns, or do
They
they not
do.
have guns as well? Okay, so they have the
They do.
guns. No one else does, and that's obviously shown to be not that this would necessarily be a situation we should run around using them, but it's on the path to where what if and how would Australia how would Australia defend itself against things getting even worse?
You
Um,
can't.
I know that you just did an event last weekend, more so an SOS as it was called. Have you gotten any news from the response of how that turned out, of getting people to go to their embassies and kind of
Mm.
spur on the Australian American government to doing the right thing?
Well, yeah, it was incredible. Over 20 countries participated. So I don't think it's ever happened in history before. But this has never happened in history either. And I think countries can see that because every country is going through their own problems. Like this isn't an Australia only problem, but they can see that Australia is the tipping point. So I think the world can see that if if we can fight and if we can win here in Australia, anyone can because the odds are against us. So I think that's why the world reacted. And so I was very, very humbled by the response. And we're making some really great videos to showcase it all. And we're gonna mass email and send it to all our members of parliament to embarrass them because it's kind of embarrassing to have 20 countries protesting at your embassy to fight for your citizens' rights. It's an amazing thing.
Well, we definitely here are standing with you as we stand, for ourselves as well. Like you said, it is a worldwide issue. So we are doing the best we can. And is there any announcements that you need to make that, anything coming up that people should look out for? I do have some of your websites in the description and everything as well for people can get in touch or find what you're putting out. But anything that we should be aware of coming up soon?
Well, now that I've met people like you, because of the SOS campaign, I'd love to try and put together some global campaigns, to really shake things up a bit. I feel like people like me and you have been running around putting out spot fires or trying to educate people for 2 years, and it's become very tiring. And I think now that we're uniting more and now that we've been fighting for 2 years, I think we've learnt a lot. And I think that we can come up with ways to actually go after the source of the fire instead of the spot fires. So hopefully globally we can work together. So, and that's what the mainstream media do, of course. They perpetuate the same message. So we need to do the same thing within our networking. So we're working on that, and you'll be invited to whatever we can do. So that's really exciting. But otherwise, my lasting message would just be that every day we wake up is one day closer to us getting our freedoms back, because they will fail. We just don't know how long it's going to take. So it gives me some pleasure to wake up and realize that no matter how hard the day is ahead, we're one day closer, because that you just can't keep going with this lie forever. So the truth always prevails and good always wins. So that's my lasting vote of confidence for people.
Well, and let's hope that day comes sooner than later. I definitely appreciate you taking your time out. I know things are busy and hectic there, more so than they probably are here right now. So, thank you again for coming on the show and keep me involved. And I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the audience for watching.
Thanks.
News, current events, politics, and everything in between. This is your #1 source for finding out the truth. Never censored, never apologetic, and always patriotic. You're tuned in to the Patriot Perspective with the people's proud patriot, Alan Lee.